The Dayanidhi Rao, performing artist. Each experience ingested in me fear and hatred that exploded through my veins in a poison, like a poison. I was walking time bomb waiting to go off at a moment's notice. I was being groomed for the street. If I could sum up my life in one word, it would be a journey. My journey began into a small two-room apartment in Calcutta. My father had just resigned from his job as a driver at a cooking gas company and accepted a higher paying position as a senior driver at a hospital. The new position offered hope for greater stability and a brighter future for our family. In our family of three children, I viewed my dad as a very religious person. As a child, I remember we would never miss a single Sunday church service. On the outside, my dad appeared to fit that model, taking care to give the impression that all was good and holy in our world. He insisted that his family wear the same mask, but behind closed doors we saw another reality. One day, when my little brother, 5 years old at the time, was dressed up and ready for church, it had rained that day. So he, being the youngest, was helped to get ready first and asked to sit in a chair. Instead of sitting in the chair, my little brother ran out of the front door and slipped and fell in a puddle of water, soiling his church clothes. I remember that day very clearly as I watched my raging father beat up my brother like a criminal. The thought of my brother laying there with bruises and a swollen eye still angers and upsets me. He could not go to the church that morning as his appearance would draw undesirable attention to our seemingly perfect family. So he stayed behind with my grandparents. My heart was beating out of my chest and I was scared and angry. All I wanted to do was stay home and console my brother, but we had to go to church. I continued to steep for further I continued to creep farther and farther into my shell, scared and insecure. I did not know what it felt like to sit on a parent's lap and feel the warmth of a loving hug or the comfort that comes from a father's protection. Instead, my father became the object of my fears and nightmares. Even the term father sent a wave of negative emotions through me, which later fueled my hatred towards him. By my early teenage years, I was well mastered the art of anger and rage. I hated church, I hated its members, I hated the pastors. Oh, yes, church leaders were right on top of my hate list. After all, I felt justified in my anger and had plenty of excuses not to go to the church. I was quite successful in accomplishing my goal never to set foot back in that place of hypocrisy. At the age of 15, the crack that was once barely noticeable in our family structure began to widen and sink deeper. All of us were victims of Dad's fury. Once, at around 12:30 a.m., I woke up abruptly from a deep sleep by the family cry of my mother calling my name. Doya, I am dying, save me. Jumping out of bed, I rubbed my eyes and tried and get a clearer vision of what was happening. My mother, with hair sticking in her face from the blood, lay on the floor, bleeding from her nose and ears. She begged me for some water. As I got up to come to her aid, my father yelled out, "No," and began kicking her in the back repeatedly. As she moaned in pain, unable to cry out. I began shivering with a deep anger and fright that overtook me. In that moment, I wanted to kill my father, but there was no way to protect Mama, my mother. But that time, Mama, my sister and brother were rudely awakened by the cries and yells, fearing for her life. We all folded our hands, crying and begging him to forgive our mother and stop beating her. In his rage, he began beating us too. It was another night in our household, filled with anger, frustration, hatred, mental fatigue, and of course fear. Yet when morning came, we all had to wake up and go to school as if nothing happened. Each day I would go to school with memories of the previous night, no sleep, no one that I could share with. Each experience ingested more fear and hatred that exploded through my veins like a poison. Pictures from the previous night flashed through my mind like a bad movie reel as I anxiously awaited the next horror scene. Naturally, my grades started to fall in school, and my deep anger began to manifest itself. I became destructive and broke things in my home rather than deal with everyday conflicts reasonably and naturally. I began to flight anyone and in everyone that challenged me or my siblings. I once stopped a public bus on the road, smashed the windows, grabbed the bus conductor out of his seat, and beat him for insulting my brother and his friend. I was a time bomb waiting to go off at a moment's notice. My grooming process for the streets was advancing well. When I could find a moment to myself, I would escape to the Victoria Memorial Palace Gardens or the zoo. Skipping school, I would spend hours there sometimes and sleep on the benches to avoid my reality and tension at home. But even in those moments, I hated everything. Hate became my best friend and my weapon. Soon after, I was expelled from school, but by that time, I had made friends who convinced me that the way to success in life was to muscle my way through it. Muscle power, as they called it, could save me from the hell. I was in to create my own peace and happiness. I did, yet I was consumed by anger and hatred. I was unable to find peace. Then one day, some friends of mine who attended a local church invited me to a youth camp. Hesitant as I was, I went with the hope of getting away from home and having fun and maybe getting the chance to play the drums. I had never laid my hands on a drum kit, but loved them from the first time I laid eyes on a set. As I arrived at the camp, I was taken back at the sight of so many young people happy and having good, clean fun. I sat in the back of the room to somewhat distance myself from this unfamiliar scene and found myself enjoying the singing. I listened to the speaker talk about how God can change our lives if we would only give our life to Him. I heard His words, but my mama mind and my experience quickly flung it out. Then came prayer time. I watched as many young people walked to the front of the church to make the most important decision of their lives to personally accept and believe in Jesus. Suddenly, I heard the voice of a friend behind me suggesting that I go forward as well and make a similar decision. I tried to ignore him, but he was persistent. I even told him, leave me alone or I would punch him. But he kept on bugging me about how I needed to meet this Jesus. For the first time, I suddenly felt something different inside. Something or someone rather stronger than I nudging my heart. Before I knew it, I had got out of my seat and was walking up to the front. Without knowing what would happen next, I accepted the invitation to say a simple prayer and receive Jesus into my life. I closed my eyes, and when I opened again, they were hurting and so swollen. 2 hours had gone by. I realized I had been crying that whole time. Everybody had left. I heard soft singing in the background, and when I turned my head, I noticed the only one sitting in the room was the youth pastor. Without disturbing the whole moment, he sat patiently praying for me as God melted away years of hurt, disease, disappointment, resentment, fear, anger from my life. For the first time in my life, I realized there was something bigger, someone bigger than me that had the power to change me from the inside out. I felt a release from deep within. I felt happiness and peace, and for the first time, I felt hope. From that point on, my life began to change. The youth pastor asked me to sing one day at church. I had never sung before and didn't even know I could. When I opened my mouth and sound came out, I was even shocked at what I heard. I had never been encouraged or mentored in my gifts. But as I continued to sing more and more, my singing career took off. I began to get many offers to sing at different venues. But now I only want to sing about one thing, and that was about the love of Jesus and his power to change lives. I was soon recognized as a prominent gospel singer throughout India. The Lord showed me that what He had for me was far better than anything the world had to offer. By His grace, I was presented with the Galilean Award for Best Male Vocal on my very first recorded album. Today I travel the world singing in school, colleges, conferences, concerts, and television programs. My faith in Jesus transformed my life from the streets to the stage. Today, God had blessed me with a beautiful wife and two amazing boys. God had also shown me what a true loving father should look like. I now have the best role model. He is my Father in heaven who shows me how to love, and the one who gave me a chance to break the chains of bondage that I once experienced. One of my favorite things to do is sit my boys on my lap and let me feel the warmth of a loving bug. This is what I have learned on my journey. Give God, the one who created you in his own image, a chance to change your life. It doesn't matter how bad or how ugly things look right now. Jesus, the only Son of God, has the power to change your life.